Um, Karthik, you could also let them in here from now onwards. Admit people, okay?
Yeah,
Because I may not be able to do that. I don't
I,
want to do that, right? In the
I
sense,
have the control now. I am home. Everything is set.
yeah.
Let's close my door.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's community of practice.
Hi.
Hi, Padma. Nice to see you. Hi, Jyoti. I can see you. Pramila, Richa, quite a few known faces. It's 4:30, but then people are still joining in, so we'll just minutes more.
Sorry.
Viveki, your screen, it's not the presentation, it's just wait for one more minute.
Do we have familiar faces in today? Familiar names, familiar faces? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pramila is always there. Pramila is a cheerleader. Padma is here. Hi, Padma.
Hi,
Hi. Hi.
nice to see you all.
Yeah, lovely to see everyone here.
Yeah. Hi. Wonderful.
Sorry, my video is only switched off.
And looking forward for the math session.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So,
Hopefully,
Jayashree, you want to
hopefully.
begin?
Sorry,
Yeah?
Pramila.
You want to begin, Jayashree?
What I wanted to say is after this session, hopefully we'll be able to get the fear of maths out of the kids' mind.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, once again, very warm welcome to today's community of practice. And like always, it's really, really wonderful and heartening to see many people here on this platform. And so we do have a lot of familiar faces, many old people here. But for those who are new, for the benefit of the new people, just a little about Adhyayan. So, Adhyayan Quality Education Services is an outfit, an organization working in the field of education with schools across the country. We work with all kinds of schools, board schools, national board, as well as international schools, starting from rural, urban, all kinds of schools. And we basically help schools with quality assurance. We do school reviews, as well as a lot of professional development workshops for teachers and school leaders, both virtual as well as on-site workshops. So the community of practice platform is a platform for educators and school leaders to come together. It's a collaborative space where we come and learn from one another. We share best practices. We introspect, we reflect, we think, we question, and in the process, learn from one another. And so today's practice session is, like Pramila said, is going to be on maths, talk in maths. And we have William Power, who is based in UK, in Oxford, right, William? Will, you're in
Yep,
Oxford, right? Yeah.
that's
So
right.
he's joining us from Oxford. And Will is actually the head of assessment and primary maths at Oxford University Press. And Will is OUP's maths publisher with responsibility for all primary products and assessments. Before joining OUP, Will worked in very challenging primary and secondary schools in London and at Oxford. And most recently, he was the head teacher in Blackbird Lace at Oxford. And he took it from inadequate to good in the Oxford standard ratings in 2022. Will has a very special interest in cognitive science and pupil-centered technologies, curriculum development, assessment, and of course, in maths. He has worked as a specialist leader in education and maths mastery specialist. And he has also supported in India because Will is an associate assessor and he's participated in reviews with Adhyayan Quality Education Foundation and as well as the services. So, welcome, Will, and over to you. And we are really keenly looking forward. And today we have a huge huge number of participants from today. Over to you, Will.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jayshree. And I'll admit that I've sort of failed at the first hurdle at getting to grips with the tech. So Viveki is going to kindly manage the slides. I've got a presentation. So hopefully everything that I'll talk through, I'll be able to share and I'll be able to pass on the slides as well. Just while Viveki's sharing the presentation, amazing. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that introduction, which is very kind. And kind of talk a little bit about the experience that I've had working in India, which feels quite a long time ago now, but I did do several summers worth of work with Adhyayan and coming and visiting lots of schools across India and doing some of the school reviews, which I have extremely fond memories of. And I've been very keenly watching the participant list, and I think I can recognize lots of familiar names. So for all those people that I've met in the past over the years in India, hello. And I hope what I'm going to talk to you about today resonates. It's an area of work that I'm really passionate about, and I know that is something that has been a theme for Adhyayan and for the work that you guys have been doing more widely. This idea that we want to encourage kids to talk more, but also really like understanding what the power of talk can be in the classroom. So I hope this presentation gives you guys some, I guess, background to like why talk is important. I hope it gives you some practical ideas. I've tried as much as possible to link the talk themes to to India and to your context, because obviously 2 different countries, 2 different places, 2 different systems. But actually, I think talk is one of those things that's universal, and I think we're all sort of we all have the ability to talk in common. We all have the desire to be chatty in common, and I think that's something that is important to remember. Next slide, please, Viveki. So I do want to get people talking, which is quite hard on a Zoom call when there's so many people around. So I would encourage you, if you're in a room with somebody else, when I prompt questions, I'll give people a bit of time to have a think, because thinking time is really important. But I'll also encourage people outside of the virtual space to have a chat with whoever they're with. I'm going to be looking at the chat box, if I can click on the right thing. Yep. So it'd be great to get some responses and to hear what people's thoughts are in response to some of the things I'm going to be sharing. And in that kind of mood, the first point is to think about, when we think about talk, what is better? Thinking about the classroom, would you rather be in a noisy classroom or a silent classroom? And I want everybody in their own minds to be really honest and think, as a teacher, what is the mode that I kind of feel most comfortable in? What is the type of experience and environment that I would rather be in as a teacher? I'll give everybody 20 seconds to have a think, and you can pop in some thoughts in the chat. And I promise you, I'm not expecting a certain answer. I'd like people to be honest, because I'll tell you what my honest reaction is. Lots of people saying noisy. I get that. Healthy murmur in the classroom is indicative of thinking. That's really interesting. So I think throughout my teaching career, when, you know, teaching day in, day out, it's a stressful job. Walking into a classroom and seeing kids at desks quietly getting on with their work is a pretty nice feeling. And I think most teachers deep down feel that that's that's the natural environment that they would want to foster in the classroom. And certainly in the UK, you will get school leaders that will walk around the school and they will feel good about the fact that the school is calm and quiet. And I've sort of deliberately posed two extremes here, like a noisy classroom, the one on the left looks pretty chaotic, and a silent classroom, and the one on the right. And I don't want this presentation to say that silence is not good, because actually it can be a really important part, and it can be a really important part of the talk process. Giving students the opportunity to think about their learning, giving them space to be able to have their own internal monologue is really important. And later on, I'll talk about the idea of dialogue, thinking as an internal dialogue. So preparing what you're going to say in your mind before you say it. So silence is certainly something that is important. But we also know, and I think what I'm going to share in terms of some of the research is that getting kids to talk as much as possible, particularly in subjects like maths, is a really important part of helping them to learn better. However, you don't want a total chaotic, crazy, mad environment, because that's not good for anybody and that can be very stressful. Next slide, please. So a kind of key message really from today is that whilst talk is important, more significantly, it's purposeful talk. It's not just chatting and noise and kids being excited for its own sake. The art of good teaching and good fostering of talk is actually making sure it's purposeful. And the way that that can be done is by embedding structures that encourage good talk in the classroom. And I'll be really honest, in the UK, teachers are not very good at that. They're not very good at knowing what the structures are and the routines that they can do day in, day out with their kids to encourage purposeful talk. So we've done a lot of work at Oxford. We've done quite a lot of work in my career to actually think about what are those structures that we can teach teachers so that they're confident that when they do talk in the classroom, it is not wild, unstructured, non-purposeful talk. It's actually going to advance the learning. So today, over the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'm going to talk a little bit about what talk is. And there's a word called oracy, which I'm going to bring up, which is another way of really talking about talk or purposeful talk. I'm going to mention an organisation called Voice 21, with whom we've worked, and as their name would suggest, they are experts in developing those structures for encouraging good talk in the classroom. And the work that we've done specifically is to actually look at their work through maths, because they've done a lot of work about good talk in the classroom, but we've taken that and gone, okay, how does that apply to maths specifically? We've done some benchmarks, so we've done some descriptions of what good looks like in maths, talk in maths, a bit like the Adhyayan, I can't remember what they're called now, you've got your own benchmarks for what it looks like. Similar thing for talk in maths. And I'll share with you a document that we've made with Voice 21, which you can download for free. And it's got some QR codes with links to videos, which demonstrate good practice. And it's got lots of ideas for the things that you can do in the classroom. And these are all absolutely things you can do in India as much as you can do in the UK. The good thing about talk is that mainly you just need your voice, and that's it. Brilliant. So next slide, please. And the next one. So ideally, when we pose a question, we want to get kids to think and to talk in a structured way, like I said. So one of the talk tactics that we have developed is a talk trio. Now, obviously, we're online. We can't do this really, but if you were in a classroom, what you would want to do is you would want to get your kids to work in threes. And if you've got lines and rows of kids in a classroom, even if you've got lots together, you can have two kids next to each other, and then maybe they can turn around and face the person behind them, or they can talk as a three along a row. You can kind of figure out how you want to do it. But a really nice way of getting engagement in that tactic is to have two people talking, and you can see the two little symbol where it says instigate, build, and challenge. You would want to show them how to have a really purposeful conversation. So the example of the question here is, what is oracy? So if I was going to pose this to a group, I would say, okay, right, class, tell me what oracy is. And I want you to work in pairs to discuss your ideas, and you can use some of these sentence prompts. So structuring with really good sentence frames, sentence stems they're called. So the first part of a sentence that you want kids to use helps them to learn the right ways to have that conversation. You might say, I would like to suggest that oracy is talk, or talking in a purposeful way. And then the partner that is working with them might say they agree or disagree, depending on whether they want to build on that comment or they want to challenge it. And then the third person in that trio would be there to listen, because listening is a really important skill in oracy and talk. And they would then summarize after several minutes the ideas that they were hearing the other two. So I'm kind of describing it to you. What ideally we would do is I would say, right, everybody, you've got 4 minutes. I'd like you to get into your trios, and I'd like you to think about this question. And then the summarizer is going to summarize back. And I'm going to be looking out for people that use really good instigate sentence stems, build sentence stems, and challenge sentence stems. So I know some people are on their own. Some people are with people. I'll give you 30 seconds just, and people want to write in the chat any ideas they have about that question, and then we'll discuss. So I'll give people 30 seconds. And thank you to the people that have already started putting things into the chat. I'm having a look now. So what is oracy? So if anybody's got an, if anyone's brave and wants to put a couple of comments in the chat box, that'd be great. If not, that's fine too. I've got people saying things. It's upon the execution of the lesson and recapitulation. I think oracy is the art of talking in a classroom that gets everyone to think. Great.
Adhyayan says number talks.
Yeah. Number talks after giving a prompt.
Yeah.
So a question that's prompting some thinking, and then some structure around a question, like in maths, a number question. Great. So this is a really good way of structuring a conversation with two people having a conversation and a third person listening and then feeding back. And then you can have a whole class discussion if you want to, where you can share some of the ideas, and you can start building a kind of shared understanding of the answer to whatever question you're posing, which is kind of what we're doing using the chat. We're sort of building a shared sense of what the answer to the question could be. The art of kindling curiosity, definitely that's an important part of it. Expressing in words the content being worked on currently in the lesson. Communication ability, absolutely. That's a really important part, how you express yourself. Great. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I really like to do, once you've had that initial prompt and you've had a discussion, and we've had that discussion around what is oracy, you can start really refining the answers that you get from the pupils. And this is a really nice kind of like target board activity, where you ask the kids to go back into their trios, and you can give them the little challenge of saying, okay, you've had a go at answering that question. These are some specific vocabulary that I want you to start thinking about to refine some of those ideas. And you can give the words a different score if you want to challenge kids to use slightly more sophisticated vocabulary. And then you can give the groups the opportunity to then go away and re-answer that question. So I've done this a couple of times with groups of teachers, And I've asked them to go away and think about that question again. What is oracy? Think about the answers that they discussed, but then to actually come up with a definition that uses as many of the words in that target board as possible. And ideally, if they can use some of the words that have more points, they're obviously the more sophisticated concepts to use as well. So it's a really nice way of just motivating kids to extend their vocabulary a little bit. And I'll talk a bit about mathematical vocabulary later, because that's a key part of what effective talk does. It encourages kids to use the right words at the right time. So someone's put, I knew someone would ask this, and it's brilliant. Padma, thank you so much. What does disciplinary and literacy? So those are together. So in the center of the target board, disciplinary literacy, that really refers to the specific words that you would have in a discipline. So maths words are the things that you would find in a maths lesson specifically. You might have specific words to history or geography that would be kind of more technical vocabulary. And it's a really important part of good teaching that you develop the kids' ability to use the technical words in the right way. And particularly in maths, there's a really strong correlation with using the right technical vocabulary and the right levels of understanding. And I'll show you a little bit later some examples of how we can get children to use the right words at the right times. Because the more that children can use the right words, they can express themselves more clearly, but it also helps them to actually understand concepts better. Just going to scan. Yeah, expressing oneself fluently. Yep. Next slide, please. Thank you, everybody, for engaging with the chat, by the way. I think, I know it's doing a session on talk. It's actually quite hard to talk as a group. It's a slightly weird thing to do, but I think we're getting there. And actually, this is a good example of communication is just standing in front of somebody and talking to them. It can also be digital communication. It can be done in lots of different ways. So coming back to oracy, so the term was actually coined quite a long time ago, and it's been something that's kind of floated around in research and in education for a long time. But it was really championed by this chap, Andrew Wilkinson, and he was very passionate about the spoken word and kids learning how to talk and the importance that that is in developing learning more generally. And he put that on a par with reading and writing skills. So you will see in lots of curricula across the world, obviously reading, writing, maths are those core skills, but speaking and listening is often something that's very important. But teachers often find that hard to actually know, well, what does that mean? How do I actually encourage that? Next slide. Brilliant. So the work we've done with Voice 21, they've taken that definition the next step further, and they've created this really useful kind of dichotomy of thinking about talk. So oracy is about learning to talk. So all of the things that people have put in the chat about being able to express yourself fluently, often people think of oracy and they think of like being able to present well, being confident, being articulate, using the right words at the right time, sometimes being persuasive. So you have different ways of communicating for different contexts. So often you will see talk in subjects like English, where those kind of skills seem a bit more obvious. But Voice 21 and Oxford, we also see a double value in talk, which is not just to develop those talk skills, but you can actually enhance the understanding of subject matter, like maths, through talk activities. So oracy is about learning to talk, but it's also about learning through talk. And all of the things that I'm going to share with you today hopefully do a bit of both. It's showing how to talk well, but it's also through those talk activities helping kids to get better at whatever subject that they're studying. And in this instance, it's maths. And just as an aside, kids tend to enjoy lessons more when they can talk and that they can feel that they're participating. And I think talk is a very natural human act. And I think when people are told they can't talk and they don't have a voice, that can make them feel quite sad. So I think just as a sort of moral issue, talk is quite a fundamental part of what good teaching should look like. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a bit more of the kind of case for talk. So like, why is talk important? Ton of stats for you there. This is all kind of UK based, but what it really says is that research backs up talk as an important part of learning, and lots of different respected institutions as part of the UK landscape recognise that if you can talk well, you not only will get better at the learning you're doing, but actually there's a link between future life chances. So I'll interpret some of these acronyms that will be very UK specific, but the bottom bullet point, can you see that one that says children who don't achieve expected standard in language? So in year R, which is, I guess, KG, upper KG, basically like 4-year-olds in the UK, they all get assessed before they start year 1, standard 1, and they get judged on their level of language skills, their ability to talk. And this is quite a frightening statistic. Kids that don't meet the expected standards are 11 times less likely to achieve that same standard when they get to year 6, so when they turn 11. So basically, if you start off poorly and you don't develop those language skills early, you're always playing catch up, and invariably the kids don't catch up. And actually, that has a long-term impact. And if you don't do well at school, you're then less likely to be able to get a better job, etc. So talk is a kind of fundamental part of doing well in life, I guess. Next slide, please. I promise you, I'm not just going to share lots of stats and talk at you. There's going to be a bit of maths in a minute. So start switching your maths brains on. So OUP, Oxford University Press, who I work for now, have done their own reports. And again, this is just a bit more background as to the why. Why would you care about oracy and why do you want to do it? And I do think this is important because I do know, like I said at the start, there are some schools where it won't be encouraged because it's actually hard to get kids to talk well. And it's actually hard for some teachers and some head teachers to feel like they're letting go a bit, because you have to trust kids to be able to talk in the right way. And it can be hard if you're walking the corridor as a senior leader to hear lots of, loud noises. And I saw that in one of the comments earlier. It can actually feel quite anxiety inducing as a leader if you're hearing lots of noise and it doesn't seem to be purposeful noise. So sometimes actually making space for oracy is important in schools where they might be pushing an agenda which is much more quiet learning, compliance-based approaches. But again, just like I sort of said at the start, the key here is actually talk for its own sake isn't always purposeful. And the key thing is to have routines and systems where the teacher is leading what the talk is in the classroom and showing kids what good talk looks like. And that's where the benchmarks, which I'll share with you in a minute, that describe what good talk looks like are really, really important, because they can help you to understand what to do to make talk purposeful. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just a really quick one. Again, and I've used this before for UK colleagues who sometimes might think, well, it's a bit of a luxury. We've got to get through the curriculum. Why bother doing talk tasks? Why bother doing a triad when you can just tell kids the answer? Well, actually, the evidence shows that if you do get kids to talk, and that through talk does have an impact on outcomes. So this is, again, it's UK kind of specific terminology, but at the end of year 6, which is when kids are 10, before they go on to secondary school, kids that have had a talk-rich offer in maths perform better than the ones that didn't. And in particular, pupils who come from a more disadvantaged background, if they have opportunities to develop their talk, again, their outcomes, their attainment in maths is better if they've had opportunities to talk. So there's a kind of clear link between these ideas and the impact that they can have. Next slide, please. Just seen a comment about what about children who don't speak English. And that's a really interesting point. And I think that's something that when you have, and I know lots of schools here are either dual language or they're English medium, but they have lots of kids who don't speak English as a home language. So they're almost speaking English as an additional language in their school. I would say for those children, these types of opportunities to talk are even more important. And it's about those children hearing those clear sentence stems, those clear modeled examples of what good talk looks like all the time. Because if they're hearing those things all the time, it's being modeled to them and they're learning them. And if they have opportunities to then practice them, it's like anything. The more you practice, the better you get. So I would say that these principles apply just as much, if not more so, to children who don't speak English as a first language, particularly if they're in an environment where they're being taught in an English medium. Because that's got to be hard, right? If you're being taught in a language that isn't your first language, which I'm sure all of you do as well. And it's an incredible feat of mental agility. Right, this is the Oracy framework. So this was developed by Voice 21, and this basically describes the things that characterize good talk, and it's been split into these kind of areas. Oh, sorry, there was a noise that came on the line. I wasn't sure if it was. So when we think about Oracy, we're not just thinking about, well, we are thinking about the voice and talk, but we're also thinking about, okay, what's actually going on in the mind? What's the cognitive process that's happening when kids are talking? Well, when you speak, you've got to think about what you're going to say. You've got to have something to say. So content and preparing kids to have the right content is really important. You've got to have a certain structure. Kids that are, people that are very good at talking will do this probably instinctively, but knowing what order of the things you want to say and to say them in is actually quite sophisticated, and we need to teach kids how to do that. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'm just going to pick out a few of the other ones. Linguistic category is really important. So actually thinking about in what context you're speaking and what vocabulary you want to be using. So if you're in a maths lesson, it's probably a good idea to use maths-specific vocabulary to talk about the maths concepts that you're discussing. If you're out in the playground, that's less important, and you might want to use some more informal language, and that's okay too. But it's about recognizing the different times that you might want to use different words and phrases and different registers. I think the social and emotional is really important as well. So understanding that for some kids, talk is actually something that is not a natural thing for them, and encourage those kids that might need a bit more support to be confident to speak. And I think that's where creating a really positive culture of talk is important, and using talk tactics regularly so that it becomes a kind of embedded part of your routine. I'm aware that I'm talking through this quite quickly, and I am going to get people to have a think, and I'm going to show a video in a second that gives a bit of an example of some of the things that I'm talking about. So I'm not just saying them, I'm going to show you some examples too. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we did is we took those benchmarks, next slide please, and we thought, okay, what does that mean for maths? Okay, what are the things that make talk in maths, or what are the most powerful things that work or should be considered in the maths context specifically? So we worked with Voice 21 and we used our maths expertise and combined it with their kind of talk expertise, so to speak. And we came up with a set of benchmarks, so 5 benchmarks, so 5 things that we thought, okay, if you're thinking about these things in maths, you're going to encourage good talk in maths. We went away and wrote a document, which I'll share a link with in a second, which you can download. It's like 8 pages, not very long. There's a video in each benchmark that shows exactly what that benchmark is talking about, and it's got lots of really good practical ideas for how to encourage those elements. Next slide, please. And I'm going to share one of those in a second. So these are our 5 Talk for Maths benchmarks. I'll let you have a little read. The first one is plans frequent exploratory talk opportunities. So the idea there is that you're not going to get kids to talk well in maths if you don't actually plan for it. You've got to think about it and actually deliberately say, I want to get my kids talking, and I'm going to find opportunities to make that happen. And that's not easy, because in maths, questions are better for talk than others, and it's hard to know always what those questions are. And I'll show you some examples of good talk questions that do foster talk. Using manipulatives as a tool for talk. So manipulatives are anything that you would use your hands to help encourage the learning process. So you might use cubes to count with, you might use an abacus, you might use any number of objects, you might use numicon pieces to show number. A manipulative could be even something like a graphing tool or shapes, physical shapes. But we recognize that actually having something to hold to show what you think is a really good way to actually encourage kids to talk. So when in maths you're exploring questions, having manipulatives that help kids to show their understanding is really, really important. And the video I'm going to share in a minute is a good example of that. Number 3 is connects classroom talk with being a mathematician. And that really is about thinking that talk is as much a mathematical skill as it is any other skill. So being able to explain your thinking, being able to have a hypothesis and test it is a mathematical skill. Being able to prove through maths, through using the words that are mathematical, is a mathematical skill. And I think often we don't associate talk with maths, and that's where some of the disconnect between talk tactics and maths happens. Number 4, vocabulary, which is what I've mentioned a few times. You've got to equip kids with the right words in maths, so you've got to teach them how to express their understanding. And then number 5 is kind of the wacky one, harnessing uncertainty. And that's really about using talk tactics to get kids to try things out and to not necessarily know the right answer, but not necessarily to worry that they don't get the right answer, because sometimes the actual process of the maths is where the real learning happens, and being able to talk and explain what you've done is as important as getting to a right answer. And I know that there were some people at the start that were mentioning about, like, how do we make maths less scary? And I think this is a key part of it. If we make maths a journey to the answer as much as it is the answer, it takes the sting out of, God, I don't get it, I'm not the right answer, therefore I'm not very good at maths. Okay, next slide, please. Right, so this is what I've been talking about. So this is the document that you can download. I will share the link at the end as well, so don't worry about clicking. There's a QR code, but there's also the URL at the bottom. And again, each one of those 5 areas, there's a double-page spread, and it has ideas, and it has a link to a video, and you can really kind of take your time to reflect on which things you feel would be useful to take forward in your own settings. Again, I don't see why any of these can't apply in India. Obviously, they've been developed here, but we all talk. I nearly said people talk more in India, and then I felt like that. Like, I think people are very. I think people in the UK are a bit reserved, actually, sometimes, and a bit shy. And whenever I've been to India, I've not necessarily experienced that, and I think that's wonderful. So, talk is something that definitely is universal, and yeah. There's a book called The Argumentative Indian. I can't remember who that's written by, but it's all about that. It's all about the development of philosophy in India and how rhetoric and talk has been the real driving force behind that. So I think there's a tradition that you have in India that's very valuable, that encourages talk. So whenever anyone says that talk is not something for the Indian classroom, I think you can remind them that actually that's not probably historically true. Sorry, tangent. Right, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this first benchmark. I haven't got too much time. I can't go into all of them, but I thought I'd start with this benchmark. I'm going to show you a video next. I hope the sound works. It's about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm probably not going to play the whole thing, but I want you to think really carefully when you watch it. What are the things that the teacher's doing to promote good talk, like that purposeful talk? What are the things that the kids are doing in terms of their talk behaviours? And any reflections on what you observe that's good or interesting, and please put them in the chat. You can put them in as the video is playing as well. We'll unpick those a little bit, and then I'll show you some examples of some maths activities that are similar to what you're going to see in the video and that you can try out as well in your schools. Does that sound all right? So Vivek, if you press the next button, it is embedded into this deck. So it should just play, and I hope you can hear it. So this is a school in Leicestershire, in Leicester. Probably I would say like your typical UK primary classroom. So what you see here is what you'll get in most schools in the UK. You've got about 30 kids in a class. They sit around tables. You can see manipulatives in the middle, and they're going to use those manipulatives to explain an aspect of the maths that they've been studying. And they're going to be kind of having a little discussion with themselves about the maths that they're doing. Vicky, if
hang on, I'm just trying to, but I'm not
that's all right.
able to. So
the slide beforehand, slide 17, the URL, it's a YouTube video. So you could click, if you look in the notes.
oh yeah, got it. Okay,
You could maybe put it into your browser and play it from there.
I'll do that in a second.
I'm relying on Vicky because
you can, I mean,
my tech failed.
I'll come back to you in a second.
The other way to get to the benchmarks document that I've just mentioned is you can just type into Google.
They could ask you.
You can type Oxford University Press Maths and you get
perfectly organized. I'll start working on my thesis. Grammarly will ensure you feel confident nailing your final thesis by supporting your writing journey from start to finish.
Is that a advert that we're hearing?
Starting the lesson with a rich talk task is really, really important to almost warm up their voices at the beginning. It really engages them from the moment that they are then starting, and actually you don't have those 10, 15 minutes of lag where the children are slowly coming around to the lesson. It gets them up if we're using one of the Voice 21 talk tactics, or still at their tables but with a peer or in a group. It really links to retrieval. So when we are using the talk tasks, really making sure that they are purposefully placed where they are. So it's not just a random retrieval, it is going to link to whatever the children are using and doing in that lesson. And again, it's really good to get any misconceptions out before we start the lesson. So through that talk, you can see what children do or do not remember, or any misconceptions that they're still carrying through that we can then tackle and get started. Okay, right, you have got 4 models on the board. We have got A, B, C and D, and I want you to look at those models really, really carefully and decide which one does not belong. If it does not belong, it is the odd one out. Think about how you're going to word it. So I would like to start by saying that maybe B does not belong. And then the person on the outside can decide whether they agree or they would like to challenge what you thought. So have a little look first, and when you're ready, turn to the person on the outside. Which one does not belong? Okay, have a little think and then get started.
10p is just 10p.
Okay.
All the others show 1 out of the whole number, while 10p does. I think D is the odd one out.
You think D is the odd one out? Why do you think D is the odd one out?
Because A, B and C have like one, like, or like one, like a thing that something that's shaded in.
Okay. Can you use any of these words to help you, Logan, with what you're trying to say? What do they have? One?
Yeah, but like one shaded part.
One shaded part, okay. Elsie, do you agree that they all have one shaded part?
No, I thought A, because it's got 2 shaded parts.
Ah, okay. Oh, A could be the odd one out. Why could A be the odd one out?
It's 2 out of a whole. That could be a unit fraction, so A could be the odd one out because the rest, because A is like 2 out of a whole, where D could be 1/10 and that would be 1 out of a whole.
Ah, okay, right. There were some lovely discussions there. Can you tell me what you guys were saying?
I thought that it would be the 10p.
Okay.
Because A shows that it will be 2 out of a whole.
2 what out of a whole, Darcy? Can you use any of these words to help you?
2/3.
Okay, and what would the thirds be? Would they be the part or would they be the whole?
Part.
2 parts out of 3 or 2/3, okay.
B was
1 part out of 6. Logan, could you help Darcy? What would C be? 1 part out of how many? How many cubes can you see?
8.
So it would be 1 part out of 8. So, Loand, why would that make D the odd one out?
I thought A was the odd one out.
Okay, right, you're going to challenge what Darcy said then. But can you think why Darcy might have thought D was the odd one out?
Because it isn't measured with Nemicon or with the cubes.
Okay, and how is that one being represented?
With coins.
With coins, okay. Loan, why do you challenge her then? Why do you disagree? And you've actually considered that A could be the odd one out?
Because all of them, except from A, is a unit fraction.
Okay, is a unit fraction. We talked about that where our numerator is 1, we have 1 part.
Vicky, do you want to pause?
Okay, why is this
the
not a unit
presentation?
fraction then? Why is A not a unit fraction?
Because it's 2/3.
Because it's 2/3. Tyler, do you think Luan?
Bill, you were saying something.
Sorry, yeah, we can pause there and maybe go back to the presentation because it's nearly finished the video.
Okay.
And I know it's a little bit jerky, but I think you could hear the sound, which is probably the most important thing. So you could hear the way that the teacher was scaffolding that session and the responses from the kids. So just have a think, people who are watching, and any observations in the chat, just 30 seconds. What was the teacher doing that you thought was good in terms of facilitating talk and encouraging kids to talk? What was she doing to extend them maybe? How was she using vocabulary and sentence stems, things like that? If you have a think and then put any responses that you might have in the chat. Viveki, what time are we running to? Just so I can manage that.
We have about 10 minutes more.
Okay, cool.
If somebody wants to unmute and speak, you could do that as well. Your thoughts on the video.
There are some
Yes.
messages in the chat.
There are some
Yes.
messages coming in, yes.
Yeah.
I'm missing it.
Capita,
I like the fact
yeah.
that she had keywords and she wanted students to use on the board.
She's trying to.
She's trying to elicit the answers from students. Yeah, Jayeshi, you want to carry on?
Yeah, okay. She was making sure that every child got a chance by calling their name, so everyone gets a chance to speak. Okay.
Someone's made a point about vocabulary. I don't know if you heard, but she kept saying that's a unit fraction, and obviously that was a word that she'd introduced earlier and wanted the kids to use.
She wanted students to reason their answers, give reasons for their answers.
Yeah, definitely an inquiry-based. Right, next slide, please. That's brilliant. And the next, yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's brilliant. So this is what we kind of call exploratory talk. And that first benchmark, which is about opportunity for talk, it's thinking, okay, where in my lesson do I want to, show a process and say, do the maths like this and then get the kids to practice it? That has a place, but you also want to facilitate opportunities for kids to explore the concept. We sometimes call this messy talk, but again, everything that you saw in that video hopefully had a purpose, and the way that the teacher was facilitating the session was not to just tell the kids the answer. It was actually, okay, justify why you think it was A, B, or C, or D. What I really liked about actually was the way that she was getting the kids to challenge each other, and she was asking them to agree or disagree with their partners. And she was almost using them as the teachers in the session as well. And she was doing that in a really inclusive way, trying to encourage lots of people to talk. Again, I mentioned like that culture of talk. I think, again, if the more that you can do that regularly, it creates that safety net, that idea that I can have an opinion in a lesson and I can talk it through, and I'm not going to get told off for getting the wrong answer. And next slide, please. Yeah, hopefully you saw lots of active listening, and active listening is something we talk a lot about in which is that you're not just sitting there being like, yeah, whatever, I'm on my phone. You're not actually listening. you're actually really thinking about what the person's saying, and you're showing that you're thinking about what they're saying by responding to them, agreeing with them, disagreeing with them, building on what they're saying. Again, this idea that challenge is good if it's done in the right way and if it's done in a constructive way. And this idea that agreement is sought as a basis for progress is really important. And I think that's where the teacher's role comes in. They want to bring in the ideas and marshal them in such a way as to go, okay, right, you think this, okay, actually what you've got in common is this idea, and that's the thing that I want you all to understand, because that's where I'm taking the learning. Next slide. Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier, thinking is dialogue. So having those moments to think and prepare your answers, ideally with sentence stems and with vocabulary scaffolded and modelled. So the teacher's shown how to use the words already, given good examples, so that you can go away and think in that way, so that you're ready to then speak using those sentence frames or those vocabulary as well. Next slide, please. So in the last few moments, and I've probably talked a bit too much in the first part, but I've got a few slides where I just thought I'd give some examples of the type of maths questions that actually are really good for the talk activities that we've mentioned. So this is a really nice one where you've got, it's really simple. This is called a part-whole model. So this is about thinking about the numbers that make up another number, so the parts that make up a whole. And this is something that maybe you would do in year 1 or year 2, so when kids are like 5 or 6. And the activity here is, can you think of 3 numbers that add together to make 100? What set of 3 numbers would be easy to add and why? What set of 3 numbers would be difficult to add? So if I was going to do this in a session, I might get kids to work as a trio, so work in 3s. I might get one child to say the first number, and then another to say the second number. And then the third child then adds the first 2 numbers and says the number that will complete the addition to 100. And then really the thinking is discussing which starting numbers make it easier or harder to work out the third number and why. So it's thinking really hard about, okay, what's the maths that's happening here that maybe can create a strategy for me to think of a really good third number. And this is an opportunity to discuss things like adding multiples of 10. So if you start with numbers that are multiples of 10, they're easier to add together. Multiples of 5. And as a teacher here, you would want to listen out for kids who are using what they know. So are they talking about number facts that they know already? Are they using words like multiple? Do they have a strategy, or are they just like chucking out numbers? And if they are doing that, you might want to kind of refine their thinking a little bit. So that's a really good example of an activity that you could put on the board, or you could write on your chalkboard. You could just get kids to start thinking through as a triad. And you can see here that the keywords on the right are there to help kids to think about the learning in the right way, using the right vocabulary. So you can take that away and try that on your primary age kids, I would say probably 7, 8-year-olds. Next slide, please. This is an example. This is basically all the different talk tactics. So I've mainly talked about trios. Pair is probably the one that you're probably most familiar with. Turning and talking to the person next to you. Nest is quite a nice one. So stand apart from each other and whisper ideas to yourself. So that's, again, it's about rehearse the talk before you say it, whisper it. And in that process, it helps you to refine the words that you're using. I really like the fishbowl, which is the one on the end. So make an inner circle. People in the inner circle face each other, and the outer circle observe the talk. So the idea of promoting active listening. So on the outer circle, listening in on the conversation that's happening on the inner circle, but then they can rotate around so they can hear lots of different points. I mean, I think these kind of things, they work great in the classroom, but you can go outside and do them as well if you haven't got space in the classroom. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just a summary, really. Explore rich talk, a rich opportunity to explore an idea. I think the key thing here is that it's having those structures. So having those, okay,
Did Will just drop off?
I think We've lost Will.
We lost
back.
him. Okay. Oh, he's back.
Now I'm back. Hello.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Internet. Yeah, it's about having opportunities. So planning these into your sessions and making sure there's a structure. So it's not just, here's a question, off you go. It's, okay, this is a question that I've thought about and I want you to get into trios. It's reminding the kids what a trio is, maybe getting some up to the front and modeling it, showing everybody what it is. But if you're doing that all the time, the kids get used to it and they'll know what you're on about when you bowl, and they won't have to worry about explaining it. They'll just get it. So it's about creating that culture over time of doing it lots. I kind of started at the start by saying, you know, that's the pedagogy, how you do it, but there's also the content. So it's also having the right maths that fit in with those types of activities. You know, we're a publisher. Part of the pitch here is that we've written lots of really good questions that lend themselves to these types of activities. So the examples that you see are from things that we've made. This is a really good example here. It's a talk task, always, sometimes, or never. Often having like fake people that have an opinion that you agree or disagree is a really good way of promoting talk. So when we multiply the product is greater than the original number, is that always true? Sometimes true, never true. Write on a sticky note, get into your consensus, discuss it, and you've got the scaffolds there to support kids to say what they think in the right way with some of the keywords there. Next slide. I'm aware of time, so I'll just rush through these examples. There's not long. I just picked out a few really that I thought were quite good ones, and I'll share these slides at the end so you can take them away. Again, this is a bit more of like, you know, having an opinion. Who do you agree with? And you could have little teams in your classroom. You could have, you know, the Tia team, the Ben team, the Molly team. This is about the whole. So thinking about fractions. And when we talk about the whole, what is the whole? And these are some deliberate misconceptions. So things that kids have said that are wrong. And do our kids, when we talk about them, recognize them as being wrong? And can they explain why they're wrong? Next slide. I just put this on because it's really basic. This is similar to what you saw in the video. Same and different. Same and different is a lovely, simple way to get kids talking. Having some images and going, okay, what do these show? What's the same? What's different? And this is a precursor to what that class were doing about unit fractions. So 1/4 is a unit fraction because it's got 1 as a numerator. And these are different ways of showing what that unit fraction looks like. So you have 1 shaded square out of 4 total parts, or 4 parts. And it's a way of embedding that understanding of fractions. Next slide. Yes, similar. So it's an extension of that activity. And these use a manipulative. So we have manipulative called Newton, which are like plastic shapes. And these are pictures of them. So ideally in a classroom, you would have some kids with these physical shapes, but you could do this with anything. You could have like cubes, or you could draw grids and then color in squares, things like that. But the idea is you're encouraging the kids to notice things that are different, and the talk is about why they're different and using the vocabulary to structure their responses. Next slide. Next slide. I'll skip through that one. That's just another extension. The next one. Yeah, this is quite nice as well. Yeah, both good examples. So this is 4 imaginary kids who are responding to a number sentence, and they're saying how they would find the answer. So you could get kids to complete the different methods that they're all talking to, and say which method they think is the best method, the correct method, and why. And again, you can draw out lots of things. I mean, the maths here is about the order of operations. So you would do the multiplication first and then add on. So it's really kids' understanding of that process. And then next one, I think this is the last example. Sorry to have to rush through these. Ideally, if I was going to share these, and maybe you can take these away on the slide deck, and you can sit in your classroom, sit in your school with your teachers, and you can do some of these activities yourself just to explore how they feel. So Sushant has completed the following question for his homework. This is just a classic. Can you explain what he's done wrong? Be the teacher. So get into your pairs, get into your talk partners, and work together to explain, as if you were the teacher, the thing that Sushant has done wrong. And this is a little exit task. So this might be something that you would do at the end of a lesson on equations, and you would use that to elicit whether or not the pupils had actually understood what you were teaching them in terms of that that session. Again, throughout all of these, you've got the key vocabulary at the bottom as well. And what you would do as a teacher is you would want to model, explain using the right words what to do. Next slide. If you just skip through this kind of goes through another activity which uses Numicon shapes, and I'll maybe leave this one with Becky because we haven't got time, but it's in the slide deck. If you have Numicon, which I know some schools probably do in India, this is an amazing activity. But if you just skip through, it's got a few animations, but if we go to the next slide. When I've done this with teachers, they've got annoyed. It's actually not possible to find the answer unless you do a little trick. But that's always a good sign if you can get people being annoyed at the maths because they can't see why it works. You can say, well, why? You tell me why it doesn't work. It's all to do with odds and evens and multiples. Yep, next slide. Yeah, I forgot like 4 minutes, Jayshree. I know people's time is precious, but I'll just get to the end of the presentation. So I talked about vocabulary, and you could see in all of those activities, there was always at the side was these are the key words I want you to use. And they're not just sat there as words to look pretty. They're there for the teacher to model, show exactly how you would use those words in context and to support the kids to use those words. Now, one of the issues that we found is like, well, what are the right maths words for the different age groups? You know, would you use the same vocabulary in year 1 as you would in year 5? Probably not. And teachers here have found it really hard to know what words to use. So we've developed a resource, which again, you can read freely, which goes in all of the different year groups. These are the key topics to study, and these are the right words. Sorry, I can hear someone talking. Okay, great. If you click through to the next one and the next one, yeah. So again, there's a QR code here. This does require a sign up, but it's free. You just have to put in your email address. And what this is it's just, these are the words, if you're a standard 1 child, that you would need to know. And these can go into slide decks or you put them on the board when you're teaching. And the idea is that the words build. So you're not just introducing a word that relies on understanding of other words that they haven't taught yet. There's a progression of building the words from the ground up. And it's important that pupils are taught the right words at the right times so they build on each other and they don't conflict, if that makes sense. Next slide. Yeah, this is just a one on classroom culture. I think the key thing about talk is doing it with the right structures so that it's purposeful, and getting kids really used to those structures by doing them regularly, because the more they do them, the more you do a trio, the more you do a fishbowl, the kids won't be worried about doing the activity, they'll be thinking about the maths, and ultimately that's what you want. You want to be thinking about the actual topic that you're teaching. The pedagogy, you know, the tactic that you're using is just a way of getting them thinking in that way. It's not the end in it itself. Lots of praise, lots of positivity, creating that safe space for kids. Next slide. Yeah, this is just a recap of the benchmarks. We kind of very quickly touched on 1 and a bit of 4. Next slide. A lovely quote, which hopefully reinforces what we've been saying. It's about creating the conditions. So it's about thinking really carefully. How do I... Talk doesn't just happen. Purposeful talk doesn't just happen. What are the conditions that I need to create? I need to have structure. I need to plan for it. I need to think about the words in advance. Like you would in anything, you've got to be organized. Next slide. Yeah, this is just a link again. So this document, I would encourage you, if you're interested in anything I've mentioned, it's about 8 pages. Each of those 5 benchmarks has a double-page spread. It's beautifully designed, so it's really attractive. You've got a QR code with a video. So like the video you saw, but there's a video for each of the 5 things that shows each of the 5 things in action. And you've got some really good examples of ideas and a few screenshots of maths activities as well. So definitely encourage you to have a peek of those. And the next slide. That's it. Sorry to basically run out of time. And it's a huge topic. It's a really important topic, and there's so much to talk about. Thank you so much for all of your engagement in the chat. Ideally, we would do a lot of talk together, but I think that's something that you can maybe take away. And if I was going to be interested in this from a school's point of view, I would maybe have a staff meeting or a series of staff meetings where you could show one of the videos and just get teachers to reflect, what's good about what you can see there. And if there are specific things that people are interested in, like if it's the vocabulary piece, go and look at the benchmarks, look at the vocabulary area. If it's about that idea of uncertainty and exploring and not knowing the answer, have a look at that benchmark and see some good examples of activities for that as well. But it's all there, it's all online. Thank you. Any questions if we've got time?
Yes, I would like to ask one question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So, trying to integrate talk and maths with the help of thinking and working mathematically. So, just using all the features of thinking and working mathematically to improve the talk in mathematics. How will it work? Do you think it will work?
Yes, I do. And like I say, I mean, there's so many elements to talk, but I think mathematics, lends itself to being very talk rich. It's just about thinking about the content in the right way and thinking, okay, I'm not just always teaching a process. Fluency of process is important in maths. Kids got to know the times table, kids got to know the number bonds, but at the same time, that's not all that maths is. And you want to encourage them to think mathematically, like you said, and it's having the right questions and the right structures to support that. So encouraging them to talk to each other, showing them sentence stems that help them to disagree or agree with each other. Those are the things that will get them to think mathematically, which is an important part of being a mathematician as much as just being able to parrot, algorithms or number sentences. And that's traditionally kind of how we see maths, but that's only a very small part of what maths should be. It's a rich and talk-rich subject. Thank you for that question.
And I liked, Will, what you said. We jump into procedural fluency rather than real conceptual understanding, right? The more the children talk, the deeper the concepts become in the deeper learning of concepts, right? So so I think it's from conceptual understanding then to procedural fluency, because fluency is important. I liked what you said. Yeah, correct.
Well, you don't want to be worrying about whether you can add up 5 and 7 when you're doing it. Like, you should just know that, but that should help you to then think deeper about a more complex question. I mean, there's a lot of cognitive science research that is based on, practice over time, getting it from your short-term memory into your long-term memory, and needing to have good procedural fluency, but also opportunities to rehearse and practice types of questions so that it sticks.
Right. There's one question from Inderpreet Kaur. What types of strategies should be followed for creating differentiated learning plans in maths?
Yeah, good question. So
Mute.
Someone's unmuted at the wrong time. Yeah, differentiation. I would say, like, talk is actually a very inclusive thing. Like, everybody, well, most people can talk. It's not true to say that everybody can talk. And actually, there's a scale of confidence in talk. So one aspect of being inclusive when you're developing talk strategies is thinking about confidence, that pillar of the social and emotional aspect. I would say, like, a lot of really good open-ended exploratory talk practices have their like low threshold, high ceiling activities. So they're activities that everybody can access, and actually using manipulatives is a good way of doing that. If you're trying to do number bonds, you could use cubes. And everybody can make a number bond generally. But if it's a rich activity, there's ways of thinking about the maths which extend your higher ability learners. So you can have one activity that is accessible by lots of different attainment levels. So that's one way of looking at it. But it's about the richness of the task in one sense. So low threshold, high ceiling, and probably haven't got time to go into that too much, but maybe that's something to Google. Trying to think of a really good example. The one that I've got on the screen with the Numicon shapes is a good example of that, because it's about creating number bonds. So a number plus a number is another number, and you've got to create a set of number bonds using the numbers 1 to 9. And that in itself is quite an easy thing to do. Most kids would be able to do that. But understanding why using that restricted number of shapes isn't possible requires a higher level of understanding factors, multiples, odds and evens. So it's an activity that your lower ability kids could access as well as your higher ability kids could access. And that's sometimes what's really valuable in terms of being inclusive. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other questions? You could unmute and ask.
I think Jayashree, we've
Run out of
time. Yeah.
So yeah, just one or two takeaways, I think, before we leave, Viveki, that would be good.
Yes.
Anybody
Perfect.
who wants to just unmute and just share a takeaway or two from today's session, Will's session.
Yeah, I would like to say something.
Yeah, Sabah.
So I really found it very interesting when he says that children should be using the right vocabulary, the right math vocabulary. Sometimes they are doing the right things in class, but they are not coming up with the right words. So the emphasis on using the right word, especially in a math class, I think it just we missed that entire idea of having the right words. I think that was very interesting. Also, learning to talk and learning through talk. It makes so much sense when you look at these two just word phrases, you get into the depth of the class and you are able to make so much more sense when children are talking and when you're guiding them what has to be said, maybe by using manipulatives or anything like that. I really like that idea. I'm surely going to implement it. Thank you, William.
Wonderful, Sabah. That was a very, very important takeaway, I think. Anybody else? You'd like one more at least. I'm sure Will would like to hear. Okay. All right. So thank you, Will, for a brilliant session. I think what stands out to me is one sentence that I saw right in the beginning in one of your slides. Good talk actually combines pedagogy with content. So unless you really look at pedagogy, I mean, if it's a student-centered pedagogy where students are allowed to speak, where we have opportunities for students to speak, we are not going to have good or purposeful talk in the classroom. It would just be probably noise. Right. So I think that really stood out for me, apart from a lot of other things which you really said about, about, of course, conceptual clarity and before procedural fluency. And again, what Sabah said about, having, children talking. What was that other thing that Sabah said? I forget. But yeah.
Learning through talk.
Learning through talk, yeah. So learning through talk is important, right? So talk is really important, and unless we hear students speak in the class, the teacher is not going to know really what the children have learned. Yeah. So that's extremely important. So thank you so much for a very, very insightful and a brilliant session. I know it was a little short. The time ran a little short for you. Kind of speed through the last few slides, but I think it's going to help because we will share these examples with our participants today, and also we will share the links for the resources that Will has given us. So we will be doing that. And I also want to tell you that Will has been so busy in the last few days, and it's been really difficult for me to even get a few minutes of time with him. And Yeah, and he was, I think, traveling from London to Oxford when I caught him, and I said, "Can we have a meeting now?" You know. And so it's really tough. And thank you, William, for all of that. I know I was after you for a few minutes to just understand the flow, but yeah, I think it was brilliant. And thank you
I
so
think I got you, but I got you a bit worried, Jayshree.
Yeah. So it was not about
Sorry
that.
about
It's just, yeah. So, I just wanted to know, so that if we could support you better through with the tech and stuff like that. So that was it. But I think it
No,
was, yeah, ultimately, I think it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. It was so engaging. Thank you so much. And for all the participants here today, thank you for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. Like every time, I think this just shows your passion and your interest and your dedication to your students. I think everybody who comes here on a Saturday afternoon, who sacrifices their sleep, the afternoon siesta, it's just that, it's because you care for your students, right? Thank you so much. And we will be sending a feedback form. Please do fill it up with your full name, because that full name which you write is going to be on the certificate that we'll be sending out to you, along with your email ID as well. So we'll be sending you a feedback form, and along with your certificate. Once you fill your feedback form, you'll get your certificate along with the links for the resources and all of the other examples, math examples that Will shared with us today in the slides. And thank you so much.
Super. And just quick thing, we'll be having financial literacy workshop coming up.
Yeah.
A series done by Ms. Shilpa. She is the vice principal of Jasudin School in JML School in Mumbai, and followed by Spokey's workshop.
COP, Community of Practice. It's all about student voice again, how we can have students, running the school, students participation in school management. So, that will also be a very, very insightful and a very engaging session. That's going to be on 27th of this month. And like Viveki said, the coming week, we have a 2-part series on financial literacy. So we will be sending you that the link for registering that as well. So please do look at it, and also encourage your teachers and all your other contacts, your other friends, to join these workshops and our COP platforms.
So, Tanvi, just to answer your question, how do you register for all our upcoming workshops? You can just follow us on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and you will be updated on all the sessions happening. And now that we have your email ID, we'll be sending you all the updates on a regular interval. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been brilliant. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jayshree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Viveki.
Right. Bye.
Bye.